5 days before my engagement party, a life insurance policy worth $2.8 million almost left my name forever. Not because I died, because someone I trusted with the keys to my house in Charleston had already started rewriting the paperwork as if I never existed. My name is Major Samantha Lee. I am 34 years old. I serve in Army intelligence. Most people meet me and see the uniform, the posture, the quiet. They assume I live a simple life. They are half right. I live carefully. I always have. When you spend your career handling information other people are not supposed to see, you learn that privacy is not a preference, it is a discipline. I grew up outside Charleston, South Carolina, in a house that smelled like salt air and Sunday gravy. My mother came from a big family that stretched across 3 counties and never forgot a birthday. That side of the family produced cousins the way Charleston produces humidity. One of them was Damon Kent. Damon was 5 years younger than me. At family cookouts, he was the charming one, the one who remembered every aunt by name and always offered to take the leftover casserole home. He called my mother Auntie even after she passed. He sent me care packages when I was deployed, nothing expensive, protein bars, cheap coffee, handwritten notes that said things like "stay sharp" and "come home in one piece." I used to think that meant something. Looking back now, I realized those notes were practice at being useful, practice at being trusted. I bought my house near the Battery after my second deployment. Nothing flashy, brick, quiet street, a small study with a floor safe bolted into the concrete. Inside that safe, I kept what every intelligence officer eventually keeps at home when the base is too far and the hours are too long. Copies of personal records, banking files, insurance documents, and yes, materials related to my work that were authorized for temporary home storage under strict protocols. The Army does not joke about that, neither do I. When I left for longer assignments, someone had to check on the house, water the plants, bring in the mail, reset the alarm if the power flickered during a storm. Damon volunteered every time. He lived 20 minutes away. He had a spare key. He knew the alarm code. My mother had always said, "Family looks after family." I believed her. I had no idea what that key was buying him. The life insurance policy was not something I advertised. Senior officers are encouraged to carry substantial coverage, especially those with clearance-heavy careers and no spouse yet to share survivor benefits. Mine was a private, high-value policy layered on top of my military coverage. $2.8 million. The beneficiaries were structured carefully, a portion to a trust for my younger sister's children, a portion to a scholarship fund my father started before he died, and a contingent structure that kept the bulk protected from exactly the kind of chaos I deal with for a living. Damon should never have known the number. He should never have known the carrier. He should never have known where the policy packet was filed. But he did. The trigger did not look like a crime. It looked like happiness. I got engaged on a Thursday evening in late spring. His name does not matter to this story as much as the timing does. What matters is that I called my family the next morning. I told them there would be a small engagement gathering at my house in 3 weeks. Nothing formal. Garden lights, sweet tea, the kind of Charleston evening where everyone pretends the humidity is charming. Damon was the first to text back. He said he was proud of me. He said he would help set up. He said he would swing by the house early that week to measure the patio for string lights. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have one relative who simply showed up. That was my first mistake. 2 days later, I received a call from my insurance carrier. The representative was polite, confused, and carefully professional. She said there had been a beneficiary review request submitted under my name. She said documents had been uploaded through the online portal. She said a notarized change form appeared to appoint a new primary beneficiary. She read me the name, Damon Kent.
The room did not spin. In my line of work, panic is a luxury you schedule for later. I asked her to freeze all pending changes. I asked for copies of every uploaded file. I asked for IP logs, timestamps, and the notary information on the form. She said she would send what she could. She also said something that lodged under my ribs like shrapnel. The signature on the form looked consistent with samples already on file. My signature, except I hadn't signed anything. I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a long time. Outside, a delivery truck rolled past. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and went quiet. Inside my head, every unlocked door in my adult life started lining up in formation. I didn't call Damon. I called the one person who already had a reason to watch my house. 6 months earlier, after a security review at work, I had quietly retained a private investigator named Ruth Calder, not because I suspected family, because I handle sensitive materials, and my command had recommended layered personal security for officers living alone off base. Ruth's job was simple on paper: monitor the property, flag irregular access, make sure nobody with the wrong curiosity got near the study safe or the documents inside it. I had almost canceled her contract twice. It felt excessive, paranoid, expensive for a woman who already locked her windows twice before bed. That morning, I was grateful I had been paranoid. Ruth answered on the second ring. I told her what the insurance company said. There was a pause. Then she said 4 words that changed the temperature of my blood. I already have footage. 8 months. That was how long Ruth had been quietly archiving motion alerts from the cameras I authorized around the property: front porch, side gate, hallway outside the study, a discreet angle on the bookshelf wall where the safe sat behind a false panel. I had told myself the cameras were for package thieves and curious teenagers.
They were about to become evidence. Ruth came to my house that afternoon with a laptop and a face like sealed orders. We sat at my dining table. She did not soften it. There were 12 instances in 4 months where Damon entered the house while I was gone. Not for mail, not for plants. He walked straight to the study. He punched in the safe code. He photographed documents page by page with his phone. On 2 occasions, he removed folders, left the room for 11 minutes, and returned them slightly out of order. I watched the timestamps. I watched him glance over his shoulder toward the hallway camera he clearly did not know was there. I watched him smile once, small and private, like a man who just found a shortcut through someone else's life. Empty. That was how my trust felt, sitting there in daylight, watching my cousin inventory my existence. Ruth that more. She had plate reads from a car that was not Damon's registered vehicle, parked 2 streets over on 3 of those nights. She had a still frame of him holding my insurance packet open to the beneficiary page. She had a partial view of a second phone, cheaper, prepaid looking, that he used only while inside the study. I asked her why she had not called me sooner. She said the pattern had looked like nosy family until the insurance office called me and the dates lined up. She said she was 24 hours from bringing it to me anyway. She said she was sorry. I told her to not be sorry. I told her to go deeper. So I did what any soldier does when the perimeter is compromised. I stopped hoping and started collecting. The next 2 weeks were not cinematic. They were methodical. That is the part people skip when they tell stories like this. Justice is mostly paperwork with a pulse. I requested a full document package from the insurance carrier. The notarized form was clean at a glance. Raised seal, stamp, dates, a notary name I did not recognize from Charleston County. The signature was good, not perfect, good enough to pass a tired clerk. The loop on my capital S was slightly too narrow. The cross on my T sat a fraction high. Most people would never notice. I notice details for a living.
I hired a forensic document examiner, recommended through a JAG contact. I hired a forensic accountant, even though this was not yet about missing bank balances. Patterns of deception rarely stay in one lane. I called my bank and placed extra fraud alerts on every account. I called the credit bureaus. I locked my credit. I changed every password I owned from a clean device. I replaced the safe code. I replaced the locks. I did not tell Damon any of it. He texted me twice that week about string lights and whether I wanted a champagne toast table. I answered both messages like a woman planning a party. There were credit inquiries I had not authorized, 2 of them, soft and recent, under a misspelled version of my name. There were debts forming in places that were not mine yet, small exploratory lines, the kind fraudsters test before they commit. There were loans pre-approval emails landing in a secondary inbox I barely used. Damon was not only aiming at a death benefit, he was building a hallway of open doors around my identity. Looking back now, I realized the life insurance was the prize, not the whole operation. A $2.8 million policy pays when someone dies, but personal data pays every day you are still breathing. Bank routing numbers, officer housing history, policy numbers, beneficiary structures, copies of my passport photo page, my social security card, which I was foolish enough to keep in the safe during a PCS season years earlier and never moved. All of it had been under his phone camera. Days passed. Ruth traced the prepaid phone purchases to a convenience store off Savannah Highway. Grainy footage, hoodie, same walk. Damon paid cash. The forensic accountant found gambling platform withdrawals from Damon's personal accounts, heavy and rhythmic, the kind of losses that turn charming men into desperate ones. Online casinos, offshore books, a private poker circle in North Charleston that met above a shuttered bakery. In 11 months, he had burned through a car title loan, 2 credit cards, and money his own mother thought was going toward trade school. He did not need my plants watered. He needed a miracle with my name on it. The forged notary was the hinge. The examiner found that the notary commission number belonged to a woman in Georgia whose stamp had been reported stolen 8 months earlier. The seal impression on my form was a replica, high quality, wrong ink density under magnification. The so-called notarization had never happened in any legitimate office. It had happened in whatever room Damon used when he decided my life was inventory. I sat with that fact for a full night, not crying, thinking. Because the ugliest part was not the money, it was the timeline. Several of the safe entries happened while I was stateside, but on temporary duty, close enough to drive home if he had called with a problem. He did not want help, he wanted access. And the engagement announcement had accelerated everything. Marriage means paperwork. Marriage means new beneficiaries. Marriage means a future in which a distant cousin with a gambling hole in his chest gets pushed further from the will of a woman who was finally building a permanent life. He wasn't just stealing, he was racing a clock I did not know we were on. The first confrontation was not supposed to happen yet. I wanted the civil and criminal file thicker before I let him see my eyes. But Damon came to the house 4 days before the engagement party with a bag of patio hooks and a smile that had fooled 3 generations of our family. He hugged me in the doorway. I let him. We walked to the kitchen. I poured sweet tea. My hand was steady. That part of military training nobody puts in recruiting ads. The ability to hold a glass without shaking while your blood lists every exit in the room. He talked about lights, about music, about how proud my mother would have been. That was the sentence that almost broke my composure. He said her name like a password. I set my glass down and asked him casually whether he had noticed anything unusual at the house while I was away, any mail, any packages, any signs of tampering.
His face did the smallest thing.
A flick? A calculation? He said no. He said everything had been quiet. He said I worked too hard and worried too much. I smiled the way I smile in briefings when someone is lying and I want them to keep talking. Then I told him the insurance company had called. I will give him this. He did not bolt. He performed confusion first, then concern, then a soft little laugh, the kind you use when you want the other person to feel foolish for suspecting you. He said there must be a glitch. He said identity theft was everywhere. He said maybe someone had targeted me because of my rank. He said he would help me fix it. Help. I thanked him and walked him out. On the porch, he paused, looked back at the hallway toward the study, and asked if I still kept the spare key under the same pot by the steps. There was no spare key under that pot. There never had been. He was fishing. That night, I called Ruth. I called my attorney. I called a friend in the local police department who had handled fraud cases involving forged financial instruments. I did not demand an arrest on emotion. I delivered a packet. Timestamps, footage, document examination findings, gambling records, the stolen notary commission, a written timeline that read like an operations log because that is how my brain builds truth. The detective did not whistle or swear. He just nodded once and said this was enough to start. The engagement party was canceled with a lie about work. My fiancé deserved better than a lie, so I told him the real version that same night. He sat beside me on the couch while I played one clip of Damon at the safe. He did not speak for a long time. Then he said, "We handle this before we celebrate anything." I had chosen well there, at least. What followed moved faster than grief and slower than anger. Damon was interviewed. He denied everything until the hallway footage made denial sound childish. He tried a new story. He said I had asked him to organize my files. He said he was helping me prepare for marriage paperwork. He said the photos were for safekeeping. Then they showed him the forged beneficiary form with his name in the primary line. The room went so quiet I could hear the clock in the hallway. He cracked on the gambling before he cracked on me. Said he was drowning, said he only needed a bridge, said he never planned to hurt anyone, as if redirecting $2.8 million and cloning my identity were victimless hobbies. He admitted he had practiced my signature from holiday cards I sent his mother. He admitted he entered the safe because I had once, years earlier, asked him to retrieve a passport folder before a sudden flight, and I had trusted him enough to give him the code for that single morning. One morning. He had kept the number like a loaded weapon. The twist I did not see coming was not Damon's guilt. It was how many people wanted to excuse him before the evidence stack grew too tall. An uncle said young men make mistakes. A cousin said gambling is an illness. Someone at the second family meeting actually asked whether I needed to press charges since the money had not finished moving. I stood up in that living room full of shared blood and old photographs and said the sentence that ended the soft version of this story. He used my dead mother's memory to stay close enough to rob me. After that, the room found a different kind of quiet. Criminal charges followed: forgery, fraudulent documents, identity theft-related counts, attempted insurance fraud. The case did not need theatrical tears. It needed exhibits. Ruth testified clearly. The document examiner turned one signature into a map of hesitation strokes and pressure inconsistencies. The insurance carrier's records showed the portal upload originating from a device trail that matched Damon's prepaid pattern. My attorney forced restitution language that covered every dollar of the investigation, the lock replacements, the forensic work, the camera enhancement, the attorney fees, and the time cost of rebuilding my credit protections. Damon pled on the hardest counts when the alternative became obvious. He will carry a felony record through the rest of his small life. The family that once passed him plates first at Thanksgiving stopped taking his calls. His mother loves him. That's her burden. Love without accountability is how men like Damon learn to hunt inside their own bloodline. I did not keep a victory speech ready. When the final order came through and the policy was fully restored under corrected protections, I sat in my study with the safe door open and looked at the folders he had touched. Then I changed every structure again. New beneficiary review, new counsel, new protocols. Ruth stayed on retainer. The cameras stayed up. Trust, once breached at the perimeter, gets rebuilt with architecture, not nostalgia. People ask what I did with the relief of still owning my own future. The policy remains what it was meant to be, protection for the people I love if my work ever ends the hard way. But the restitution money, and a separate amount I set aside when the case closed, went somewhere else. I built a fund through a Charleston nonprofit that helps victims of identity theft and document fraud, especially women who live alone, military members who deploy and leave houses behind, and older adults whose relatives suddenly become very helpful with paperwork. Not inspirational slogans, practical help. Credit freezes, legal clinics, forensic document reviews, temporary housing lock changes, a hotline staffed by people who do not tell victims they're overreacting. Because I keep thinking about what would have happened if Ruth had not already been watching, if the insurance clerk had been less careful, if the engagement had come 1 month later and the beneficiary change had cleared, if I had died on an ordinary highway drive and the first version of my death paid a gambler who learned my signature from Christmas cards. That thought still steadies my hand when I brief young officers about personal operational security. Your clearance does not protect your kitchen table. Your rank does not impress a forged notary stamp. Your family key can become an entry wound. I still live in Charleston. I still run at dawn along the water when sleep will not stay. I still serve. The engagement eventually became a marriage in a courthouse room with no string lights and no cousin at the door. It was enough. It was clean. Damon wrote me one letter from the far side of his plea. He said he was sorry for the stress. He did not say he was sorry for the plan. I did not write back. Some doors, once used against you, stay closed on purpose. If you're waiting for me to say family is everything, I will not. Family is what remains after the truth has been allowed to speak in full sentences. Mine got smaller. It also got safer. And the house, my quiet brick house with the study and the false panel and the cameras nobody interesting should ever notice, still stands. When storms knock the power out now, I'm the one who resets the alarm. I water my own plants. I bring in my own mail. Independence, it turns out, can be a form of peace. Before you go, tell me which part hit you hardest. Was it the stolen key and the trusted cousin, the forged signature on a $2.8 million policy, or the fact that the investigator protecting military documents was the same person who caught a family member stealing a life? Leave it in the comments. If you've ever had to protect something precious in silence while smiling for relatives who thought you were too busy to notice, this channel is for you. Subscribe if you want more true stories about money, betrayal, and the moment an underestimated woman lays the whole file on the table. I'll be here, steady, paying attention.